So hello everyone and welcome back to the P. Carroll Sport Podcast. Paul Carroll here, and on this week's episode we are looking ahead to the big one. The Tipperary County Senior Hurling Final is almost here, and over the course of the next half an hour or so, or however long I talk to myself here in this room, we're going to talk about Lockmore Castleiney versus Nina Rogue. We're also going to look ahead to Upperchurch Strumban against Carrick Swan and Knockavilla Doneski Kickham's against Golden Kilfeacle. What a weekend we have to come here in Tipperary, and there's loads to get through. So as always, if you're new to this channel, I make loads of content regarding Tipperary GA, mostly hurling. So subscribe to the channel if you're new. And because it's a county final special, let's get back to that 100 like goal on this week's podcast. So 100 likes and you'll keep me happy on this week's episode. But as I said, lots to get through. And yeah, so much excitement, I feel anyway, building up towards county final weekend. County final weekend, it's always an exciting time. Anytime these big finals come around, I always really look forward to them. I always think there's that anticipation of history about to happen. So, you know, if I go back through the county finals that I've been commentating on, let's say my first one was 2022, Killer 1 against Killadangan. You know, I remember these moments from games and I'm looking forward to witnessing another moment. So, you know, the 2022 final, Seamus Hennessy wins an unbelievable free at the very end and Willie Cleary puts it over the bar. That leveled the game. And then in the replay, Cian Darcy's goal was kind of key in that winning of the game for Killer 1. Jerry Cal was so good in those games. You remember that. You go on to 2023 and you remember Willie Connors for Killadangan with that long range point to level the game, send it to a replay. And then in the replay, Sean Hayes got that big goal for Killadangan in that final replay. Last year, we'll all remember Conor O'Mara's goal for Toomey Vara that got Toom back into the game. Then John McGrath went down the other end and scored a goal straight away. And you could go back 2021, John McGrath's free on the sideline on the 21 in the replay after being fouled by Paddy Maher to win that final. 2020, you know, who could forget the puck out from Barry Hogan, Joe Gallagher snaps it, and Brian Malachny breaks through for a memorable goal in extra time. So all these county final moments come to mind in a week like this week. So yeah, it's just real excitement building. And what are we going to see this weekend in Semple Stadium? Hopefully it's something memorable and hopefully it's a good final. So I'll get to my predictions and all that as we go through. I've predicted all the games so far in this year's championship. I haven't predicted them all right, of course. I think my record is, 62 out of 105, I think, is what we are. So let me pull that up. 62, this is the final. We go down to semi-final. And yeah, I did a poor week in the semi-finals, 4 from 9. But you'll see it there. 62 out of 105 is my hit rate. So if I was to keep at that, I should get 2 of the 3 finals correct. I don't know if I'm that confident in predicting the winner of 2 of these 3 finals, to be honest. And that goes for all of them. Particularly, as I'm preparing to record this podcast, I'm thinking in my head, right, who am I going to predict for each game? How do I see it going? This game between Carrick Swan and Upperchurch Strumban, as I'm talking to you now, I don't really know who's going to win. I think that's so tight. I have a bit of a feeling in the intermediate, if you've listened to this podcast throughout the year, you might agree, or you might already know who I feel is going to win that one. And then the senior final, well, we'll get to that as well. So we're going to get to all that over the course of the next, I said half an hour, we're nearly 4 minutes in already. So let's talk about something that has kind of hit us all here in Tipperary this week, and that is the passing of Philly Ryan, the Tipperary senior football manager. Died suddenly last Saturday afternoon. I was down in Clonmel at the funeral last night. You know, Philly was someone that, you know, if you're a hurling follower here in Tipperary, which you probably are watching this podcast, you might have known of Philly Ryan from being with football. Maybe you're not that much into the football, but you know, since I started commentating on games in 2022, I was lucky enough to get to know Philly. You know, he done plenty of commentaries with me up and down the country at tip football matches. Always a great lad to have a laugh with. Always had that kind of glint in his eye where, you know, anytime you were talking with him, you were going to be laughing or joking about something, and he always made you feel calm. And you know, I only knew Philly for a couple of years, but I felt like, you know, I was his friend. And then he moves on and becomes the Tipperary senior football manager, and you go from, you know, him sitting to my left while we're commentating on games to me doing post-match interviews with him. And you know, even then, no matter what happened in a game, you're always able to have a laugh with him before or after the interview, even during the interview. Um, Audio played out on Tip FM of me interviewing Philly after the last game he had with Tipperary this year. That was against Leitrim, and even in that interview, he's telling me it's a long term project. We're called for patience. We're a young team, and as he's saying it to me, he's almost kind of smiling at me, thinking, "This is such manager speak." Like, he was kind of almost having the laugh, and we were joking away. And before and after games, I remember the Watford game this year. Tip were well up against Watford in Semple Stadium in the semi-finals, and um, you know Tip were up by like 10 points and brought on a few subs, and suddenly Watford got a goal and got a couple of 2-pointers, and it was back to a point or two deep in injury time. And just talking to him on the field after that before interview, and kind of being like, Jesus, that nearly got out of hand there, like just having a joke like that. So it was great to get to know him for the few years I did know him. So very, very sad last night. So as I did last night, passing on all my condolences to the family, but thought it was something that we had to mention on this week's podcast. So such a big character in Clonmel, such a big character in Tip football, and just what a loss he is going to be to everyone that knew him. So may he rest in peace, and he lives on in his family. Shane, the Tip under-20 goalkeeper from last year, the Tip senior goalkeeper this year, of course, and he lives on through his family and through the legacy he left behind. Tip football is a very tight-knit community. I've been able to be a part of that the last couple of years, commentating games. You go up and down the country, it's the same faces you're seeing, and unfortunately one of those faces we won't be seeing at the games anymore, and that is a huge loss and a huge shame. So rest in peace to Philly Ryan, and yeah, that's all I can say really. It's just desperately sad situation, but may he rest in peace. So we will move on now to what is to come this weekend, and that is of course the County Senior, Premier Intermediate and Intermediate Hurling Championships. First thing I wanted to mention, I do have some notes written out that we will get to in a bit, but if I bring back up the screen so you can see it here, you will see the scheduling of the games. So we have the 3 games Saturday at 3:30 in Cashel, Golden Kilfeacle against Knockavilla Doneski Kickham's. On Sunday at 12:30 we have Carrick Swan against Upper Church Drumban. That is in Semple Stadium, of course. And then on Sunday at 3:45, so 3 hours 15 minutes after the start of the first game, is Lockmore Castleiney against Nina. So that is already a talking point. I brought it up on Twitter, had a bit of correspondence from the county board to explain their point of view. When I saw this 12:30, you're thinking, God, that's early, and then you realise the second game is 3:45, and you start to do the math in your head. And when Carrick Swan against Upperchurch Drumban is finished, let's say this finishes in normal time, it will be over at about 1:45. Half an hour for the first half and a little bit of extra time, 10 minutes for half time. Second half starts a little bit of extra time, 1:45. You can push it up to 2 if you want to extend the trophy presentation and things like that. So you're thinking, okay, that's an hour and 45 minutes if it ends at 2 o'clock before the start of the second game. Very, very long time, not good for supporters, and not something that is normally done. If I reflect back to county finals in recent years, usually it's kind of 1:30, 3:30, or that's what it certainly feels like in my head. I must see, can I open up a file from last year? Let me just see, can I see the scheduling of last year's county finals? If I can bring that up in front of me, that might be something worth doing, because I feel like it's never been like that. It's never been that much of a gap. Certainly not that I remember. Maybe you might remember in the comments below. Let's see, do I have last year's championship? I do. And do I have the finals? I do. So yeah, I'll bring this up on the screen now for you to see. So last year we had the Premier Intermediate, Carrick Swan against Cashel was at 1:30, and Lockmore against Toom last year was on at 3:45. So now it's 12:30 and 3:45. So that is certainly a big change. Let me pull up this year's ones again. So we have that here. And let me pull up. So there we go. So that is a huge, huge change, and I need to make that bigger. Sorry, now I'm stalling a bit. So what gives is the question, and God, it's just crap for supporters, and even I'll be commentating on both games, so that the break between the two games is nearly a blessing for me, that I can recover from commentating on one game of hurling and recover and doing my post-match interviews, getting back up, settling, getting myself ready for the senior final. So the break isn't bad for me, but I'm just thinking of my family and any of the supporters around the county who are going to the games and sitting in the stadium for 2 hours maybe and waiting for the game. It's not good, and it discourages people from going. So I hope county final is like a celebration, I think, of the club season, and as many people as possible should be encouraged to go. And I just feel this discourages people. You could have a situation where supporters of the first game will just leave. They're not going to wait around for 2 hours before going to celebrate a county final win, or they'd be waiting around 4 hours. They'd be waiting 2 hours just for the second game to start. So and neutrals might just say, I'll watch the first game, I'll go in for the second game, or things like that. So it's disappointing. Now, from the county board's point of view, I was contacted by McTierney on Twitter the other day when I was making my arguments, and he was saying that they tried all those suggestions that I had in terms of starting it later like it did in the past, and for whatever reason it couldn't be. And you've the Toomey Vara team of 25 years ago being honoured on the field, and that takes up time as well. And TG Carr obviously wanted a certain lead in time, and I just think all that's fair enough. And he said that this is far from what they wanted and things like that, and all that is fair enough. But I would just say with the TG Carr thing, you could surely something could be said where, now obviously this hasn't transpired to be the case, but you'd imagine it could be easy to just be like, look, if that first game goes to extra time and penalties, we might have to push out the start of the senior game by 15 minutes, a half an hour, whatever you have lined up for the evening, which in turn is a repeat of Laker Gale and an episode of Contractors. I'm sure they could be pushed out, or rescheduled if push came to shove. So that's just how I see it. Now, obviously, what if the senior final goes to extra time as well, and then you're pushing everything out? All these things are. It's for the TV audience, and that often annoys the match going audience. So that's just something I wanted to bring up there, and bring both arguments forward. So at the end of the day, it's not great for supporters who are going to be there. So let's just hope that first game goes to extra time, and then there'll be no bother. There'll be plenty of entertainment there for the day. So I know people were a little bit upset about that, so I'd be remiss if I didn't bring that up. So let's get to the county senior final. Lockmore Castleiney against Nina Éireoge. Lots to talk about in this game. So many storylines that we're going to get into. And let's get into it straight away here as I just make an adjustment on my screen, and then I can bring you guys back up. So here's some notes I wrote down just so I don't forget things. So overall, what's my feeling going into this game? Lockmore Castleiney, defending champions, looking for their 6th ever county title, senior hurling title. Nina looking for their 2nd ever. They've been in 7 finals, won 1, lost 6, I believe is their record. So it's been, since they won it in 1995, 30 years ago. They're beaten in 99, 2006, 2013, 15, 18. That's 5 county final losses since their last win. The likes of Mikey Heffernan would have been involved in 4 of those. So you're looking at the likes of Mikey Heffernan coming in here, looking to play in his 5th county senior title and looking to finally get over the line. So there's that storyline there. There's the storyline of Lockmore Castleiney trying to defend the Dan Breen Cup for the first time ever. You've the storyline of John McGrath, Hurler of the Year nominee, against Jake Morris, Hurler of the Year nominee. Loads of different storylines. These teams met in the 2013 final. Lockmore had 6 players, I think, playing that day that will feature on Sunday, maybe even 7. Nina had 3, I think, in Paddy Murphy and Barry and Mikey Heffernan, and Tommy Heffernan if he features off the bench. So a few hangovers from that. You reflect back to that game, it was a 1-point game. Mikey Heffernan had a penalty early in the second half in that game in 2013 that blazed over the bar. Obviously penalties back then had the 3 lads on the line. So there's just little things like, what if they get a penalty now this time round? And now I know Jake has been taking them, so maybe you won't see a scenario where Mikey Heffernan takes it. And then you have the injury situation. So Mikey Heffernan Is he going to play? AC joint injury suffered against Killer 1, didn't feature in the semi-final against Drummond Inch, and now you're thinking, is he going to feature? So and that's another storyline. You look at the Lockmore point of view. Liam McGrath went off injured in their semi-final loss in the football last weekend in the 21st minute. John went off in the 37th minute. Now, looking back on the footage on Clubber, Liam McGrath was able to kind of jog off anyway. Seems to be some sort of groin issue. For John McGrath, he received a bit of treatment off camera and then was replaced, so you couldn't really see it. But the talk of Michael Donnellan and Gary Toohey on the Clubber commentary was that it was a precaution more than, let's say him limping off or having to be helped off the field. So just interesting to see their full fitness. Ed Connolly, I've written down as well. He went off injured in that semi-final victory for Lockmore against Holy Cross Ballycal. It seemed to be kind of hamstring. I don't think he featured in the football last week. So just little things to note there. Like all four of those players I mentioned, the two McGraths, Ed Connolly and Mikey Heffernan, could all play, and this is irrelevant. But it's just little things to note going into this game. Lockmore are the favourites in the bookmakers. I think they're about 8-13 to Nina's 6-4. So Nina are the big underdogs going into this one. But I just can't get away from the fact that I have a feeling about this game. I'll try and put forward arguments. It's kind of hard to do it. But I just have a feeling about Nina. Now, maybe it's because I live 5 minutes outside the town. Burgess is my club. We're neighbouring with Nina, just in the road. I work in Nina. I'm around people who are interested in Nina a lot. I'm seeing Nina flags when I'm going around. Maybe I just have that bias in my head from going around, but I just have a feeling. And it doesn't make sense really when you look at the records in finals in recent years. As I went through it, Nina have a pretty poor record in finals, I think it's fair to say. They've kind of lost close games and things like that. But I just have a feeling. I'll try my best. Like, I think they're really athletic, Nina. So should match up fairly okay with Lockmore. Now, there is some matchups that from a Nina point of view you would be worried about. I don't know if, I would imagine they're going to put Conor Hennessy on John McGrath as I look at the team sheets in front of me. It's impossible to have someone to match up to John McGrath. Now, Cathal Barrett done a really good job of it in the semi-final and kept him scoreless. But then Noel McGrath in the middle of the field, who do you put on him? Do you say, right, let's sacrifice Sam O'Farrell and put him on Noel McGrath, but then you're losing what Sam has to offer? Do you, put a Mason Cawley on him, a kind of man marker athlete to run around after him? But then, that sort of player in a Mason Cawley is nearly better with in the half back line and surging forward. You can't really do that if you're marking a Noel McGrath because you're going to leave him behind you. So what do you do? Do you put a Conor Ryan, your captain, on him and just say, Conor, this is your job, stick to Noel McGrath? Because Noel McGrath is the key man, really. The points he got for Lockmore before and after half time against Holy Cross were really key. We talked about that in last week's podcast. So he obviously takes watching. And now you could sacrifice your best player and put him on Noel McGrath, and Noel McGrath still scores 5 long-range points from play and organises and orchestrates everything in the middle of the field. That is the thing. So do you just say, like, Joe Caesar was put on him for Holy Cross, and he'd done okay, but we didn't see the go forward Joe Caesar maybe we'd seen elsewhere in the championship. So I just wondered, you just say someone like a James Mackey, just say, James, you're on Noel McGrath. If you get the ball in your hands for the game, that's secondary, but your job is to just deny. Is that what you do? I don't know. That's a real fascinating one. For Nina, I'm looking at who does Mark Carey maybe match up with in that forward line? Maybe a Kieran McGrath if he starts. Maybe a Liam McGrath. Ed Connolly, you think if he was to start, I think him and Mason Cawley kind of match up fairly well. What do Nina do with Barry Heffernan? Do you say to a Barry Heffernan, you're marking John McGrath one-on-one? Or do you say to Conor Hennessy, you're marking John McGrath one-on-one, and Barry, you're sweeping around? It's really, really fascinating. And then from a Lockmore point of view, Lorcan Egan is usually the man marker, so you'd imagine he takes Jake Morris. You could see an Owen O'Connell maybe going on a Josh Keller in terms of matching him for just engine and legs and that sort of thing. But yeah, there's loads of fascinating matchups, and Nina kind of deployed Jake Donlan Houlihan as a sweeper the last day, so is that going to happen this time around? The experience, the ability of winning finals, the experience of winning finals is all with Loughmore. They haven't put a foot wrong all championship. They've kind of danced their way through the championship to a certain extent. Comfortable in that semi-final, you'd have to say, against Holy Cross, against a Nina team who've lost 3 finals in the last decade. A lot of players playing in their first ever county final, a lot of inexperience in that. But I just can't shake this feeling. Logically, the easy thing, and I've read all the predictions in the paper, and everyone's kind of going with it's just too hard to back against Loughmore. And I subscribed to that all year, but I just have this feeling in the back of my head that Nina can win this game. Now, Sunday afternoon, I could be made to look a fool, and I've been made to look a fool plenty of times, and this is just me giving how I feel. It's not me saying this is definitely going to happen, and if you think different, you're wrong, and I'm right. This is me saying I should think Loughmore are going to win, but for some reason, I think Nina are going to win. And a little thing that kind of sparked this in my head was I done an interview with Liam McGrath, the Loughmore captain, at the launch of the championship. So this was the Sunday after the semi-finals. Very sound fella, done the interview, great interview. That interview, Barry Heffernan interview, I've a load of stuff the Barry Heffernan interview is actually already on the YouTube channel here, so you can catch up with that after this. But all that audio, we're going to have a 2-hour special on Tip FM on Friday evening from 6 o'clock, previewing the county final. So that is something I really recommend you listen to. A good bit of work's gone into putting it together, so I'm hoping that it comes out well. So that's on Friday at 6 o'clock. Big preview, past players giving their predictions, or pundits giving their analysis. We talk to players from the teams involved in the final day. So there's lots to it, so I would recommend listening to that. But back to the point I was making, interviewed Lee McGrath that day, and only got around to listening back to that audio the other day as I was editing it for to put news clips together in Tip FM for the bulletins. And I was talking to Liam about the football 1 week, hurling the next week, and balancing that, and we've heard all that before with Loughmore. But he kept mentioning the word momentum, and how it keeps the momentum going when they're going well in the football and they're going well in the hurling, and it's all going well. And this was after last weekend. I would have been listening to this, so after they lost to Kilsheelan, and I just thought in my head, what happens when that momentum breaks? Obviously they lost to Kilsheelan last week, so that'd be a bit of a loss. So I just reflected back to, obviously they won all their games in the championship in hurling and football last year, so I went back to 2023, and if you can see it there on the screen in front of me, the football quarter-finals in 2023, on the 23rd of September, Loughmore were beaten by a point against Moyle Rovers in the quarter-final, so they were beaten in the football. And then I thought, what happened the following week in the hurling? So I looked that up, and the following week in the hurling, 7 days later, Loughmore were beaten by Thurles Sarsfields in the semi-final. So I was like, okay, so they lost the football and they lost the hurling. Interesting. Lee McGrath spoke about the momentum and how important that is. And then I think what happens when the momentum breaks. Then I go back to 2022, and it works in the adverse way this way in terms of hurling first and then football. So on the 24th of September, they were beaten by Drum and Inch 21 points to 18 in the hurling quarter final. And the following week in the football, so this was the semi-final on the 2nd of October, their next game, they were beaten by Upper Church Drumban by a point, so they lost the hurling and then they lost the football. So now look, you can go back to 2021 and Loughmore won the double. Okay, so maybe does that prove my point, or does that, who knows? Okay, so that's just something I just picked up, and it's added to my theory building in my head that maybe it's Nina's time. And there's all the likes of Mikey Heffernan playing in the fifth final, hasn't won one. I doubt there's anyone who has lost more finals than a Mikey Heffernan. 4 county finals last, without winning one. It's a horrible record to have, but I'd imagine there mightn't be any others if you can think of. And I'm just thinking, is it the time to break that and finally push through the barrier? And you've these young lads coming through in Nina who know nothing but winning, the likes of Jake Donnell and Houlihan, the likes of Mason Cawley, Sam O'Farrell, Jake Morris, form of his life, Hurler of the Year nominee. Is it all coming together at the right time? That is the argument I am putting forward for Nina Éire Óg. So here I am, Lockmore, I predicted them to win probably every game they've been in, I think. I don't think I went with Holy Cross the last day. I went with Lockmore. Did I go with Lockmore in the quarterfinals? I did. I'm going to go with Nina. Based on what, Paul? Based on vibes. That's all I can say, really. Based on vibe, and that's not being disrespectful to Nina. I've gone through their team. I think they're just. I just wonder, are they coming at the right time? Now you could say, oh, a lot of these young lads, it's too soon, and the older lads maybe they have scar tissue from finals. That's just how I feel. Now we all know Lockmore, incredibly hard to beat them. I don't see this game being, more than 3 or 4 points either way. Would I be surprised if Lockmore won? No. This is me saying Nina 51% to 49. So that is my prediction. I just have a feeling about Nina for some reason. So I'll be honest with you, that's just how I'm feeling. So yeah, let's see how that prediction goes. So that is my first of the 3 predictions. We are going to go with Nina Aerogue. Before we get to the Carrick-Swan Upperchurch prediction, which I feel like I still need time to even make my prediction on that because it's so hard to call. Let's just take a quick moment from our sponsors. Not really our sponsors, but just a little reminder of something to play out here. Have you bought your tickets yet for the 1,000 shot challenge in support of Tipperary GA and Burgess GA? I'm going to take 1,000 shots from the 65 on the 1st of November, and the amount I score is the winning number, and if you have that number, you win €1,000. So check the links below if you want to get involved. 1 ticket, random number, costs €5, but you can get 5 random numbers for 20 quid, and it all goes towards Tipperary GA and my own club here in Burgess. Whew. I haven't even hit 20. Starting to feel 1,000. So that is, of course, my fundraiser for the Tipperary GA Quid Games, the 1,000 shot challenge. I'll leave a link below. I'll throw up the QR code back there on screen. Many thanks to the people who've bought in already. Basically, as I've explained there in that video, you would have heard, if you're listening on the Spotify, you would have heard the audio version of that ad. Yeah, 1,000 shots I'll be taking on Saturday week. So you have until next Friday to buy your tickets, but they could be gone by next Friday. So I would encourage you, if you do want to get involved, you have a chance of winning €1,000. You can buy your numbers below. So yeah, any support in that would be greatly appreciated. So that's my first. Is that our first ever ad on the P Carroll Sport podcast? And it's not really an ad because it's it's me. I'm sponsoring my own podcast here, but that is something that I'd be really grateful if you could support it all, €5 or €20 or whatever you can. That would be greatly appreciated. As we have our second last podcast of the season, the next podcast will be the review podcast, and in that podcast I'll probably go down through my team of the year and who I feel should get called up to tip off the back of the club season. So all that is next week's podcast, and then I'll probably have my feet up for maybe a little bit and before we get going again. So not long left, so I said I'd give that a mention. So let's get back to the predictions now, and the next one, God almighty, is this hard to predict. Carrick-Swan against Upperchurch Drumban. Upperchurch overcame Gartnahoe in the semi-finals with a 1-point win, 20 points to 19. And Carrick-Swan were more comfortable over Borland than maybe the scoreboard suggested, but Borland did get it back to 3 points with time up. Let's go down through their quarter-final pairings. We had Carrick-Swan even beaten Silvermines by 4 points that day, and Upperchurch had a 5-point win over Killinall. We mentioned Upperchurch had that moment of madness, I suppose, against Ballina, where they got that late goal with Gavin Ryan dropping it into the back of the net from a long range free, and if that didn't go in, they wouldn't have gotten out of their group. And now look at them, they've pushed on and they've got into a county final. And I was probably lower on Upperchurch than I was Carrick-Swan throughout the season, but from seeing them in the semi-final, I was just thinking to myself, it's going to be really hard to beat this Upperchurch team. Keith Ryan, really good fullback. Gavin Ryan, his older brother, brilliant centre-back. Dean Carew back there. I was impressed with Niall Grant, albeit he was taken off at half-time, I presume through injury. Diarmid Grant, real stout defence back there. Kieran Short pulled off a good save in that semi-final. So they're really hard to break down. And then Paddy Phelan put in a superstar performance in that semi-final. If you're talking about tip call-ups, it's often who can do it on the big day and in Semple Stadium. And Paddy Phelan put up his hand for sure the last day in terms of his performance. Then you have the likes of Conor Fahey and Pat Ryan, who maybe didn't show their best in the semi-final, but on their day, they can score 3-4 points easily by themselves. Luke Shannon nailed all the frees, especially a couple of big ones, and Paul Shannon is a brilliant ball winner that we've seen throughout his career, both hurling and football. So they have a really, really good team. And let's not forget 3 years ago, they're in a senior semi-final against Killerone MacDonough's, and Killerone went on to win the Dan Breen, and then they were relegated the following year. So it's been mad, and they lost the semi-final last year, Upperchurch, to Cashel after extra time, but they have been really dominant. I think they've only conceded 2 goals in the championship, Upperchurch. So they're really, really tough to break down. So a really hard team to beat. So it's hard to kind of back against them. For Carrick Swan then, you look at the likes of Stephen Tobin coming on this year, wouldn't have been on it last year because he wasn't of age last year, and how much he's improved, the team in terms of his work rate the last day was unbelievable, and that class he has to pick off scores. Gavin O'Halloran, I've always spoken about how big of a fan I am of Gavin O'Halloran's style of play. Aaron O'Halloran has really developed even more as a leader in this Carrick Swan team. Aaron Dunn has been scoring goals at vital times, and of course the free taking of Callum Lanigan has just been sharpshooter as always throughout this year as it was last year. So this is a really interesting matchup. I think Carrick Swan have the greater scoring power. That the stats would probably back that up. I don't have all the results written down in front of me. Maybe I will have that by the time I'm commentating. I haven't put together my notes just yet. But I think Carrick Swan in my own head have the greater scoring potential. But then when you look at it, Pat Ryan didn't score for Upperchurch last day. Conor Fahey got a couple of points, I think. If they are back to their best in the final, they'll chip in for 7 or 8 points at the minimum, you would think. And then Paddy Phelan, if he can keep up that performance, Upperchurch are capable of putting up a big score themselves as well. So this is really an interesting matchup, and really looking forward to it. I think, if this was a group stage game, I would be putting draw beside this, and we'd be moving on, and I wouldn't have to talk about this game for too long because it's really, really hard to predict. This is finish on the day, as is the senior final. So someone is going to lift the Seamus Arene Cup come Sunday afternoon. Is it going to be Carrick Swan who were beaten in last year's final? Is it going to be Upperchurch Drumban trying to get back up to senior? I've been saying Carrick Swan all year, and I'm going to stick with Carrick Swan. Again, I don't want to be the broken record of really, really hard to predict. We all know it's really hard to predict. And again, if I'm going 51% Nina, 49% Lockmore, in this game I'm going 50.1% Carrick Swan, 49.9% Upperchurch Drumban. So I am giving my nod to, I put down Upperchurch Drumban, I meant to say Carrick Swan, so that is something I've corrected there. So Carrick Swan is who I'm going to go with, but I'm not even going to say what you think I'm going to say. I'll say it anyway. Don't be surprised if Upperchurch win, right? Brings us now to the intermediate final. All 3 of these games, by the way, on Tip FM over the weekend. So if you're out and about, if you're not at the games, or maybe even if you are at the game and like to listen into the commentary, we will be live for those 3 games this weekend. Now, the intermediate final is on Saturday at 3:30 in Cashel, an all-West Tipperary affair. Golden Kilfeacle against Knockavilla Donaghskee Kickham's. I've been going with Golden all year since the very start. You could go listen back to the very first podcast, and I said I fancy Golden Kilfeacle to win this competition. I've seen nothing throughout this campaign to turn me off that prediction as I aggressively look for the team sheets here in front of me while I talk to myself here. Why can't I find this? So basically, I have been going with Golden Kilfeacle throughout this campaign, and I've seen nothing to throw me off that. Now, what I have seen from Knockavilla Donaghskee Kickham's is a really good performance against I just can't find this. A really good performance, as we've all seen, against Bursakane last time out. All the scores they got. Adam Daly, how good was he that day? He put up a monster score of what's he get? 7 points from play. Stephen Brown, really impressive. Am I ever going to find this fucking team sheet? Is it just not? It's definitely in this program. what are we looking at here? These are intermediate. Here we go, intermediate, right. Knockavilla and Golden Kilfeacle, right. So an interesting thing I noticed on the programme from the last day is the bottom teams from this semi-final programme, the bottom team on both pages. So the bottom teams on the senior pages and the bottom teams on the intermediate and Premier Intermediate pages all made the final. So I don't know, is that something to think about going into next year's semi-finals? Probably not. But as I go down through these team sheets now, just to refresh the mind, yeah, really impressed with Stephen Brown, of course, his free take. And Elliot Thompson had a busy game, actually, looking back on it the last day. But really, it was Adam Daly who was so impressive for Knockavilla. He's going to be a marked man, you'd think. Niall Heffernan or someone maybe picking him up. Ben Curvin, maybe even, I was thinking. They know each other from Tip under 20s. Ben would know his game. Ben is a brilliant player. Whatever role he's tasked with doing, he can score, he can defend, he can go box to box. Really impressed with Sean O'Halloran the last day. He's lively in the middle of the field, really quick, can get a score as well. Obviously, the main man in this championship all year has been Jack Leamy. Like, he put up a performance for the ages pretty much in the final a couple of years ago against Borland Duel. I think he scored something like 14 out of Golden's 15 points maybe that day off the top of my head. So, and he has been even better this year. He's at probably one of the first names that come to mind, along with Sean Ryan of Temple when I think deserve a tip call up following the club season. He is right up there, and you could say the same for Adam Daly, of course, as well. So really interesting battle. Two West teams, so you always have that dynamic of local rivalries and kind of form being kind of thrown out the window when local derbies come together. It's on in Cashel, it's on in a divisional ground as well, so it's a real West Tip feeling to this one. But as I said, I've no reason to not say Golden Kilfeacle after I've been backing them all year. So I am going to go with Golden Kilfeacle to win this year's intermediate hurling final against a game Knockavilla Donaghskee Kickham's team. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this week's podcast. 37 minutes in. I've gone with Nina, Carrickswan and Golden Kilfeacle. We could be looking at 3 red lines here come the review podcast. But hopefully there's a little bit of green just in terms of my own I don't know, does it make me look good? I don't know. I don't really care about that at the end of the day. What I'm hoping for is 3 really good finals, and yeah, maybe even that first game on Sunday to go to extra time, just to kind of spare us all maybe the waiting around in Semple Stadium. But that's our last preview podcast of the year. Now, worth noting as well that intermediate final is not finished on the day, so if that's a draw, that will go to a replay. Of course, the winner of the intermediate championship here in Tipperary doesn't go through to Munster, so there's no real rush there. The Premier Intermediate will go through to Munster. So worth noting, the senior final, whoever wins that, will be playing Aero Guinness in a Munster semi-final. So that's something worth noting as well. So yeah, that is it for this week's podcast. A reminder to like the video if you haven't already, and again, the 1,000 shot challenge. You can have a good chance of winning €1,000. Buy 5 numbers, buy 1 number, whatever you can. It's much appreciated. The links are below, and the landing page looks something like this, and the get tickets button is here right beside. If I no, the other way. What way do I point? Right there, right there is where you can buy it. So yeah, I suppose it kind of feels like a last day of school kind of vibes here on the podcast. This is our last podcast until the finals. It's been brilliant. The county finals, the county championship has kind of gone quick in a way, but when you reflect back, it started a week or 2 after the All-Ireland final, and that feels like a long time ago. But it's, for myself anyway, it's been one straight into the other, but it has been really, really enjoyable. I hope you've enjoyed all these podcasts. It's not exactly the last podcast. We're going to have the review one next week, so if you're out and about at the games, and want to find out or hear what I have to think for some reason, next week's podcast will be there as well. It won't be on Monday. I'm actually golfing up the country on Monday morning on a nice bank holiday Monday. So probably more than likely Tuesday, if not Wednesday of next week, by the time I get time to record the podcast and give my reflections. So until then, reminder to like the video if you haven't already, good reviews and all that, retweets, everything like that, at P Carroll Sport on all social media platforms. It's always much appreciated. Enjoy the games over the weekend. Don't take my predictions to heart, and we'll see you on the review podcast next week. Good luck and God bless.